the stuff that comes crawling out of those cans and bottles should not be anywhere in a food environment. So where should it go? By the bakery section, the fruit and vegetables?
Welcome back to Closer Look. It's Monday, the 22nd day of September. Michael Friscolanti, editor-in-chief here at Village Media, is here. I am Scott Sexsmith. Welcome back to the program. Okay, let's get right to it. Breaking news earlier today out of Queen's Park.
Yeah, the workday kind of started with some major news coming out of the provincial legislature. The journalists who cover Queen's Park were given a very brief alert out of the Office of the Premier saying that Sault Ste. Marie MPP Chris Scott is no longer in caucus.
Right.
No explanation of what happened. That was it.
Just one line. That's
one line. And we know from experience that when that kind of thing happens, there's something big that happened to lead to that being done. By the middle of the morning, our team at Suit Today, Kenneth Armstrong, working with our team at the Trillium, Jessica Smith-Cross, Charlie Pinkerton, putting out the breaking news story. Ken pulled the court records from the courthouse here in Sault Ste. Marie, and it turns out that Chris had been charged over the weekend with one count of assault and one count of assault with a weapon, which obviously led to what happened.
Right.
Now, at the same time, Premier Doug Ford was giving a morning press conference and was asked about, because before the charges were announced, someone asked him, well, what happened? And he said, you should go talk to the Sault Ste. Marie police.
Yes.
So obviously, Premier Ford was briefed on the fact that there was a criminal investigation and criminal charges laid. That's what we know at the moment as of tonight. Things we record this a couple hours before it comes out, so a lot could happen in the couple hours. It opens up a ton of questions. He's out of caucus, so he's now an independent MPP.
Right.
He's facing 2 serious criminal charges. Will he resign as an MPP and just say, that's enough, I have to deal with these criminal matters? Could that trigger a by-election here in the Sioux? What's interesting too, Scott, is I don't know if people remember, but this was one of the closest races in the February election.
Like 118
votes. And it was an interesting dynamic because Chris is a newcomer to Sault Ste. Marie. He worked for former MPP Ross Romano, but is not from Sault Ste. Marie. And in the 2 years prior, had actually been working in the office of Premier Ford.
That's right, yeah.
And was handpicked by the Premier to run in this riding. Came back, ran, insisted he was going to be a strong voice for Sault Ste. Marie, that he knew the issues here. And he was up against a very well-known member of the local community, a city councilor, Lisa Vezo-Allen, who has worked on all kinds of different charitable organizations in the Sioux. She's very well-known, and she ran for the NDP. And it was a super tight race, like you said, a little more than 100 votes separated them. Chris Scott won, and now all of a sudden, poof, he's out of the caucus. And so it leaves that community wondering, we voted, the community voted for the person who was going to be part of the governing party. Everyone knew Doug Ford was going to win the election. The polls were all showing it.
Of course, yeah.
They chose the governing party over a strong local representative. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens. By the time this comes to air, who knows where we'll be.
He may have already resigned.
Yeah, who knows? But it's not every day that a sitting MP or MPP is charged with serious criminal offenses that trigger them being booted from caucus. So some big news. Our team at Suit Today has been breaking the news. They've led the country on this story.
Yes.
No one else. We had the charges first. Our team at the Trillium has been working alongside them. So if you're looking for the up-to-the-minute coverage, obviously you'd stick with Suit Today and the Trillium. We're going to have a lot more on this in the hours to come. We'll probably be talking a lot more about it on the show as well this week.
All right, let's get to tonight's show. And where do I bring my empties and what's going on with that?
Yeah, sticking with the provincial government. This has kind of been a brewing problem, pardon the pun.
You've been just
waiting. I've been waiting hours to say that. But we know that the Ford government allowed liquor and spirits and beer to be sold in convenience stores, grocery stores. But there's this problem brewing because independent grocery stores are saying, what are we going to do with all these empties? Because we now have to accept the empties that come back. And these are grocery stores. They're not built to be a major recycling operation. So we're kind of hearing horror stories from local grocery store owners around the province, around the country, about how they're going to handle this. Because it's mandatory by January 1st that they get on board.
That's right, yeah.
And a lot of them are starting to say, forget it. I'd rather not sell liquor because the hassle and the safety and public health concerns of having all these dirty beer bottles right in my grocery store are just not worth it.
No.
So it's kind of a really interesting topic. So we're going to speak to Gary Sands. Gary Sands is the VP of Government Relations at the Canadian Federation of Independent Grocers. He's been with the independent grocers, I think, for 25 or 30 years. Yeah. He knows the issues inside out. We're going to chat with him about beer bottles. We're going to talk tariffs, interprovincial trade. what's the difference between made in Canada and produced in Canada,
Right.
and the whole Buy Canadian movement. I think it'll be a great conversation, so good timing.
It's going to be. Crack a cold one. Have a watch. Very pleased to be joined tonight by Gary Sands. Gary is the Vice President of Government Relations at the Canadian Federation of Independent Grocers. Gary, thanks for being here tonight. We appreciate your time.
I'm happy to join you.
All right, before we get into some details, Gary, can you tell us a little bit about the Canadian Federation of Independent Grocers? Who do you represent?
It's just what the name implies or says. We represent independent grocers. So they're family-owned grocery stores across Canada. There's about 6,900 independent grocers in this country. A lot of them, they're in urban, rural, and remote areas, of course, but a lot of them are in those rural and remote areas of the country where more often than not, they're going to be the only grocery store and source of food for those communities.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's great. Thanks for that, Gary. We want to talk to you about an issue that may not be on a lot of people's minds tonight, but will be soon, and that issue is empty beer bottles. There's a bit of a problem looming, especially for independent grocers across the province. Gary, what's the concern?
The concern is primarily food safety. The government has announced that they want to allow all grocery stores and convenience stores to be able to sell beer and wine in their stores, which is fine. But at the same time, they're telling the stores that they have to take back all the dirty empties, bottles and cans. And by the way, it doesn't matter where they bought them. So the convenience stores, for example, are exempted from this requirement. But even if you bought the products at the convenience store, the independent grocer would have to take them back. So the first thing is remember too that the retail footprint, and that's a fancy way of just saying the store size, is going to be a little smaller for a Main Street grocer as opposed to a Bay Street grocer. So the challenges of taking these empties back are going to be more pronounced in a smaller store setting. So the first question we've asked the government, still waiting for an answer, it's been a deafening silence, has been, where do you suggest in the store that customers bring these dirty bottles and cans, other than providing an asylum for yellow jackets? The stuff that comes crawling out of those cans and bottles should not be anywhere in a food environment. So where should it go? By the bakery section, the fruit and vegetables, maybe the yellow jackets are like that, or by the meat section. And in addition, the government is saying you have to then find a separate space in your store, clean them, sort them, and make them ready for the beer store to pick up. So even aside from the food safety stuff, now the retailer, an independent grocer who's on a margin of 2%, and I didn't pick that figure out of the air, by the way, that's overall 2% is StatsCan for independent grocers. So out of that, now you're going to have to chop off some of the space in your store to make room for all these dirty cans and bottles, which means a loss of revenue because something is coming out. And again, we've asked the government, any suggestions on what should come out? And just a deafening silence. And if I could just add one point, and this is what makes it even more of a head scratcher. A few weeks ago, I should explain to your listeners, there's a discount allowance that the LCBO provides of 10% to retailers, convenience stores, restaurants, bars when they're ordering, the beer and wine to offset the costs of getting this stuff on your shelf and all that stuff. A few weeks ago, they increased the discount allowance for the convenience stores to 15%, but they left grocery at 10%. Now, the average person would probably wonder, well, why would you do that? Because you've exempted the convenience stores from having to accept the empties. You're plopping this all on grocery, but you're going to increase the discount allowance for the convenience stores and not the grocery. And to be honest with you, I thought, if anything, they would have tried the reverse, given it more to grocery. Even then, I'll be honest with you, it wouldn't have made a difference because food safety can't be negotiated on price.
That's right.
But that's where we're just perplexed at what the government is doing. And this stuff with the convenience stores particularly rankles the independents. Independents are small businesses. The two biggest players in the convenience store sector are Couche-Tard and 7-Eleven. Couche-Tard which is Circle K for your listeners, that would be pretty visible. They're bigger than Loblaws. 7-Eleven has their headquarters in Texas. So why are you providing extra benefits and exemptions to those guys and the independent grocers who are family-owned businesses here in Ontario? They're not big monolithic chains. They're hitting them over the head.
It's a great question. I wonder, did the independent grocers, did anyone know that when the government announced that they were going to allow more sale of beer, wine, and spirits in grocery stores, that you'd be on the hook, that the grocery stores would be on the hook for dealing with empties? Was that known at the beginning?
No. And in fact, when it became known, that's why you're having so many grocery stores. I'll just pick for the independents. The pickup's been about 5%. So it's been very low. And in fact, some independents already had beer and wine licenses, which were given to them under the previous government, because the Wynne government first started this trend. Nothing in their agreement says anything about recycling. So as one of our members pointed out to the government, how come when you wanted to get out of your agreement with the beer store, you threw them $250 million, but with our agreements, you just ignore them? Because those independents, they have agreements. There's nothing in those agreements that says anything about taking back empties, but we're just going to ignore that.
And what was their response, Gary?
I'm still waiting.
Just like the other ones.
Gary,
I'm being honest with you.
Yeah,
you guys, you could reach out to the government. You'll get the same answer we did, which is crickets.
And are you still waiting for an answer as to why convenience stores got that 15% discount versus grocers at 10%? Anybody challenge the government?
Oh, no. We've asked them, and we're still waiting for an answer to that one. Why are small business grocers not getting that, and the big monolithic multinational chains like Couche-Tard and 7-Eleven are getting it? No answer.
Okay, what about independent grocers thinking of canceling their liquor selling licenses because this has become such a concern? Is that a thing? Is that happening? Is there talk of that?
Absolutely, and I wouldn't keep repeating it if it wasn't true, and I wasn't absolutely convinced that it's true. We have independent grocers who have licenses that they received under the previous system, and they have indicated that on January 1st, when they're required to take back these empties, if that hasn't been changed, they're turning in their licenses. And that you can take to the bank. It's guaranteed. You can interview me again in January if this hasn't changed, and I'll give you the names of the independents who absolutely will cancel their license.
I'll put that on the calendar for January 1st. We'll make sure we get you on. But that's interesting, right? You can imagine the dilemma that a grocery store owner has, right? They know that it's like you said, especially if you're in a smaller community where you're the only game in town. People want to be able to buy liquor at your store, but you're also struggling with, I can't handle this demand where I have to take back all the recycling. That's a tough call for an owner.
It is, but especially we have to think outside of Toronto. I at least I'll speak for myself. I'm here in Toronto, but we have to think about the rest of the country, the rest of the province, and much of this province is much different than Toronto.
So just so I'm clear, Gary. By January 1st, it's mandatory that if you're part of this, you have to be accepting recycling, and only a few right now have actually opted in and started doing that. Is that right?
That's right. If you are within 5 kilometers right now, if you're within 5 kilometers of a beer store location, you do not have to accept the recycling. As of January 1st, that reference is completely gone. It doesn't matter if there's a beer store next door to you; you have to accept the recycling.
Okay, I see. And you do expect, like you said, that some stores are just going to say, forget it, we're not going to bother. I guess the question I had for you is, what are the horror stories you're hearing? Like, you've talked about how stores are saying, geez, where am I going to put these things? Are some stores being just overrun with people coming back with their empties?
Yeah, the only one I can give you an example of, because like I said, we've had a very low pickup, but we have one grocer, his name's Gordon Dean. He has 4 stores in Eastern Ontario, and because of that beer store requirement, he is taking them back. And the stuff he's telling us about would I don't have much hair left, but it makes it stand on edge. He says they're dirty. The stuff that's crawling out of these things, there's flies, bugs, yellow jackets, and he says the smell is just horrendous. And certainly does not enhance the shopping experience. He's had to install these special pass things in the area where they're supposed to be stored. He's had to hire extra staff just to deal with it. It's just a nightmare. And he said the other thing is when the beer store comes to pick it up, I can't remember the name of the equipment they use to pick up the empties, but he said, I don't want it in my store. He had to tell them no, because they go to different locations, but they never clean it.
Ugh.
So, like I said, it's just a nightmare. And when other retailers, grocers hear about that, it convinces them, no way.
Here's what I don't understand. You've got one side of the government mandating this, but then you've got another side of the government who's also mandating certain health regulations, health and safety requirements that need to be met.
Yeah,
they're talking out of both sides of their mouth.
But that's hilarious that you're saying. I shouldn't say hilarious. That's actually one of the issues we took back to them is saying we've got your own government, public health authorities, and the CFIA enforcing certain regulations and expectations that you have around retail grocery. This requirement completely flies in the face of that. Can you tell us what your consultation with those bodies indicated?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still waiting for that answer.
It's fascinating. I'm going to go next time I'm in an independent grocery now. I'm going to be looking in the back to see where they're hiding all these empties. Yeah, it sounds like an awful situation. Like you said, these aren't multimillionaire grocery owners that are making this kind of money.
Family businesses.
And it kind of segues. I mean, we're already struggling. I'm sure these companies, these grocers are struggling enough right now under the tariffs that Donald Trump has brought in, just kind of magnifies things, make it worse. Can you speak to that, Gary? How have the tariffs, now that they've been in there for a few months, how are they impacting our independent grocers, say, in Ontario?
It's been tough. Obviously, Canadians, as you know, have already been very, very concerned about the whole issue of food affordability. So again, I don't want to sound like a commercial, but it is a fact that if you're an independent grocer on a 2% margin, you're going to be really sharpening the pencil on a lot of things to try to keep prices down. So the tariffs and the counter tariffs, they haven't been helpful. And just so your listeners understand, there's some areas where we just can't avoid importing. Right now, we're starting to come out of our growing season, but in the off season, we import in Ontario about 80% of our fruits and vegetables from the States.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I will say that if there's a positive and those costs, by the way, do have to be passed on to the consumer. I don't want to beat around the bush on that. And there's absolutely no way on those margins. If you have a product that's gone up 25% because of a tariff, you're passing that on. If you don't, you won't be an independent grocer. You'll be an out of business grocer. That's just the reality. But one of the positives has been that I have never seen in the 25 years I've been with the independent grocers a seismic desire, and that's the best adjective I can think of to buy Canadian. Mm-hmm. I know we're reading and hearing about it, but I can tell you from what I hear from our members, it's very real and it's sustained. And probably every time Donald Trump says something, it increases that demand a little bit more. So that's a positive for independents, and I'll tell you why, is because buying local is part of their business model. Mm-hmm. And it's because they have to, as much as possible, differentiate themselves from chains.
Yes.
So buying local, there's a great opportunity there, but at the same time, there's going to be some challenges.
Let's talk a little bit more about that, Gary, if we can. Can you explain the difference between product of Canada versus made in Canada?
Well, a product of Canada, and it's a good question. I get it from family and friends a lot.
Yeah, so do we. We have a hard time explaining it.
Yeah, product of Canada is 98% of the product has either been produced or manufactured, processed, et cetera, here in Canada. It's really Canadian. It's like there's no ifs or ands or buts when you're at 98%. For made in Canada, it's 51% of the ingredients or the processing or the manufacturing process has to have been done here in Canada. Now, that's a bit of a delicate issue because we all want to support Canadian. But I would say one of the challenges that we have in identifying Canadian products is, remember, I'll give you a couple of examples. Kraft Heinz, obviously a big, well-known American company. They process their stuff in Quebec. They employ over 1,000 Canadians doing that. Pepsi Frito-Lay, another big American company. They employ over 10,000 Canadians and have plants in Alberta, Nova Scotia, Ontario, Quebec. It's pretty difficult to point a finger at them and say, don't support them because they're not Canadian, when, I'm just saying on a personal level, I find that difficult. When you're processing stuff here, you're using Canadian ingredients and you're employing Canadians, that works for me.
That's right. It just shows how intertwined our economies are, for sure. I do want to ask you about grocery prices, Gary, because I'm sure your members get it all the time. We're all feeling the pinch. We've talked about this. It's night and day since COVID. Like, I look at my grocery bill now, and it blows my mind how expensive things are. And like you said, you want your grocers want to stay open. They don't want to be out of business, grocery stores. But what do you say to customers just are like at their wits' end, saying, "Why is my grocery bill so high?"
That we feel your pain because remember, independent grocers are not Bay Street grocers. As I said, they live in the communities they serve, so they know what customers are feeling themselves. And there's just too many factors that have been at play that are impacting prices. I said to one person a few months ago, it's like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse have taken up careers in the food industry. We've had climates, droughts, wildfires, the war in Ukraine, which is still having an impact on the supply chain for certain products, the tariffs, the whole disruption that's come to our supply chain. It's just constant. And when those things happen, yes, they do have an impact on prices, but they are things that we can't control. And it would be very easy for us to point the finger at the manufacturers, we call them the suppliers, and say, well, it's their fault. We have to buy them from them. We don't do that because we know all of the factors that are driving up their costs, and they're being sensitive about it too. And the fact is, this is happening worldwide. It's not a Canadian phenomenon. So it's not an easy or maybe a palatable thing that people want to hear. But the fact is, those things are just beyond our control.
Mm-hmm. And we don't have a crystal ball, which is another thing we don't have that's beyond our control. But do you see, will these stabilize, Gary? Do you think in 5 years from now we'll say, okay, things are at a little bit of a decent point? Because it just feels like now that it's full on skyrocket mode.
Yeah, I do predict it will start to stabilize. One of the opportunities that's come out of the challenge of dealing with the Trump administration has been the desire to reduce interprovincial trade barriers and start, doing more within our own country. I think that will lead to more opportunities for Canadian companies, and is something we welcome. And I think that will help stabilize prices. I really believe that. One of the things, though, that we're saying to governments, plural, the provinces and Ottawa, is that we support free trade in Canada, but we also want to see fair trade in Canada. And what we mean by that is it's one thing to say you want to buy Canadian. The reality is we are going to have to invest in Canadian. There are investments that this country is going to have to make, and that's going to require expenditures and investments from everybody, including industry. It's one thing, again, to walk into a store in Toronto and, be able to grab all the products that you can. Let me tell you, the cost of transportation and distribution in this country for many areas of Canada are significantly higher. Some of them, it costs 3 times the cost of getting a product to Newfoundland and Labrador, just because of the boat, the ferry and those kind of things. There's just so many products where those costs are much higher. If we can use the change in relationship that we've now had with the Americans, because we're pivoting from a north-south axis to an east-west supply chain axis. And I think that offers us some opportunities. And in the future, I believe 5 years from now, we'll see a much stable and a much more secure supply chain.
That's good to hear.
All right, good stuff. Gary, before we let you go tonight, any closing thoughts, anything you want to add?
No, I just think that when governments are talking about reducing interprovincial trade barriers, that they remember that we do have to talk about free trade and doing more for our rural and remote communities. We're all Canadians, and I don't think we should just be focusing on urban areas. And I think sometimes that gets lost in our deliberations and our decision making. We forget about those smaller communities.
All right, great conversation. There's Gary Sands, the VP of Government Relations at the Canadian Federation of Independent Grocers. Gary, appreciate your time tonight. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks very much for having me.
As Gary was talking, all I could imagine are the things that people put inside their beer bottles and their beer cans. And the smell.
I know.
You know what it's like when you walk into the beer store.
Yeah.
When everything's closed and sealed up, all you can smell is beer.
Yeah.
Imagine how bad that would smell in a grocery store with open containers.
Yeah, you think of like a summer party or a barbecue, a friend, like the people are putting cigarette butts in beer. There's this much left or half empty.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing good that's going on in those beer bottles.
Nothing.
And to think that they'd be dropped off right where you pick up your veggies and fruits
right beside
and
your fresh produce.
Beside the fresh produce. I didn't realize this was a thing until a couple of days ago when I was reading about it. It's really something. And I'm sure there's 7 sides to every story, but I do sympathize with these independent grocers that run. You think of like a rural community in Northern Ontario where there's a small grocery store. Where are they going to put all this stuff, right? Who are they going to pay to take it? And then they have to wash it themselves? Like with what? They got to get out the Dawn soap and like.
What the hell kind of a dumb idea is this?
It's just amazing. It's amazing. Oh, that's what we tackle, all the dumb ideas on Closer Look.
We absolutely do. And we will do it again tomorrow night with likely an update on the Chris Scott situation. Don't forget to follow us all over social media. We'd love that. Closerlookpodcast.ca to get each and every episode delivered straight to your inbox 6 days a week. That's it for us tonight. We're back tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. For Michael Friscolanti, our editor-in-chief here at Village, I'm Scott Sexsmith. Enjoy your Monday. We'll see you tomorrow at 7 right here on Closer Look.
Frisco and Scott's Wardrobe provided in part by Moores, Sault Ste. Marie.